Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. Here on American Voices, we celebrate all this country has to offer. So after hearing about people's life stories, we also want to celebrate the land. So each week, we invite authors and artists to talk about a favorite place or sound in the country. This time, we hear from Tim Wendel. His new book is called Rebel Falls, a novel. Here's Tim Wendel on his favorite place.
This is Tim Wendel, and my favorite place in America is the end of the Olcott Pier in Olcott, New York. It's where my dad had a boat. And my dad taught us all how to sail. And so we would come out of Olcott, where he kept the boat, and come out at the end of the pier. And often we'd be sailing across Lake Ontario, which is quite a ways, 35, 40 miles. And we'd often be going to Toronto, to Canada, which was kind of the wonder city, the emerald city for me growing up. And my dad was of the mind that if you could sail, that if you could understand the wind, if you could trim your sails in the most effective or appropriate way, you'd be ready for life, because that's the way he kind of felt life was. It buffets you sometimes, you get changes in direction, things you don't understand. Sometimes you're heading, as we were sometimes, because of fog or cloud, across an inland ocean, really, and you couldn't see where you were going. Yet you had to trust your compass bearing. You had to trust, in a sense, how well you could sail. You had to trust the other people around you, which were usually my brothers and sisters, that were going to get across. We must have made hundreds of trips across to Toronto growing up. And it's interesting because I lost a brother to leukemia. And that happened roughly when I was 17. He was younger than me. And he was like 11. When he was diagnosed, he was only supposed to live a year. He lived 8 years thanks to the amazing cancer doctors at Roswell Park in Buffalo. And we always felt that was a huge gift. You know, here you've got, and something that's a death sentence. And then, you know, he was a huge part of our lives, obviously. And even though he was young, he was a hell of a sailor. And my dad was adamant we all learned how to sail, and we all had jobs aboard the family boat. And the biggest boat we ever had that went across was 27 feet, which is not that big when you're considering you're sailing like 35 miles of open water. And years later, I was talking with my dad. I asked him, did you teach us all to sail as kind of your own like private pushback or personal pushback because you lost a son at that point to acute lymphoblastic leukemia? And there was this pause on the other end of the phone. We were on the phone. And in my typical dad fashion, the pause soon ended and he said, of course it was. And I was like, well, you could have told that to me like decades earlier. It would help me figure out some things in my life. But that's how important it was to him. And then when I think of all our days sailing as a family and some of the interesting situations we ended up in out in the middle of that lake, I always think back to going out of Olcott. We're rounding up in front of the pier and we're getting ready to make another crossing. My dad was in a business, civil engineering, that's, engineering is very much what you see at hand. It's really what the math adds up to be. We need to build a bridge from here to here. We need to put in water lines and such. And my father and my grandfather with their engineering firm put in water lines all over. Yet, even though he lived in a world which was very much task-driven, I think sailing really allowed him to dream. It allowed him to think outside of that to things that maybe aren't as well explained or maybe can't be found in a textbook. And that's something he really passed on to all of us. And he did through sailing. Some of my favorite times with him, with the family, were out in the water on some boat or trying to get somewhere and the wind's blowing in the wrong direction or we can't see where we're supposed to be going. And yet we always got through. And you do that enough without having somebody tell you what is conveyed is it's going to be all right. You're going to get through it. You're going to figure out a way. Trim your sails the right way. Hang on. The wind shift, did you notice that? And those are very, very valuable lessons to have. And we're all going to have trying, challenging situations. When I first started to become a writer, that's tough. One of my first books was turned down 33 times. And yet I found myself thinking about, okay, obviously I'm not doing something right. And I started looking at it from kind of sailing viewpoint to a certain degree. Okay, let's take in all the variables. How's my course, so to speak? Am I taking the right angle or tact here? What's the world around me like? In a sense, what's the wind? Which way is the wind blowing? Am I going completely the wrong way, depending on which way the wind's blowing? And I think once you look at it, take a step back from that and look at it in a little bit more, I don't want to say abstract way, but more of a particular way, the way he kind of outlined, and I would notice the way he would look at the world, then you can get through. There's a way through. You've just got to find it. But always realizing that no matter what plan you start with, things are always fluid. Things are always changing. This is one thing I tell my grad students at Johns Hopkins is, get a direction, get a game plan, figure out what works or could work, but realize as soon as you start, the world around is maybe going to be changing a little bit too. In essence, the wind's going to be shifting on you. And always, my dad always had a weather vane at the top of the mast. And sometimes, the boat would just slow down to nothing. And especially we used to race a little bit too. And he'd always used to say, look up, look up. You had to look up toward the top of the mast and you would see, oh, okay, my sails are set totally inappropriately, or my course is totally wrong for which way the wind is blowing now. And I always used to love that. Look up. The answer's there. But if you just hunker down and, pulling another line or looking at your compass, that's the answer's not there. He was totally right all the time. Just look up which way the wind's blowing. And now adjust.
That was Tim Wendel. His book is called Rebel Falls, a novel. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.